Hey, it's Red J, and I'm here to provide some tips to help you win your next game of Rival Wings. This guide assumes you know kind of the basics of the mode, such as how to summon mechs and things like that. Whether you are trying to get more poetics or get the Overwatch Winston mount from this mode, there's a lot of things that I would think go overlooked by the average player. So let's get into some of those tips. Before we begin, did you know that you can switch classes in-game at the starting platform? And the neat trick about this is that you can actually queue up as a class that you want to level. So you can actually switch classes inside the game at the starting zone, and you can go to something that you're more comfortable with. For example, I usually am going in as White Mage right now. It's at level 74, and after every single game I'm getting 1 million to 2 million experience from it. But during the actual game I'm switching to Bard, so just something I'm a little bit more comfortable on. So it's a great way to knock out two birds with one stone. All right, and so for the first tip, we need to talk about how damage on towers and the core works in general. Realistically, the only way you're dealing any reasonable amount of damage to them are through three sources: NPCs, so that includes Mammets, mercenaries, and tanks; Oppressor missiles, and then the last one is from brute justice punches. So your goal ultimately should be to lead these devices to the opponent's towers. Doing auto attacks, any skills to the towers, that's not going to do any damage. So NPCs auto walk to the tower until they're met with an opposing NPC. So my first tip is to actually prioritize Mammets over players, especially in the early game. Given how long it takes to kill players, the time is actually better spent taking out the Mammets itself and putting pressure on your opponent's towers. This gives a couple good things here. One, good train position and good mercenary position. So if the lane is pushed to their side, you can easily access the train rails in the middle to get to a good train, or you can drop down or go up depending on which side you're on of the map to access the mercenaries when it spawns. Yeah, and then let's go on to the second tip. You can actually heal the Mammets. Please, healers, if you're in lane and the Mammets are getting targeted, feel free to go and heal them up. Realistically, the damage you're doing to the opponent team isn't going to be doing that much. And so just making sure the Mammets could live a little bit longer gives your team that little bit of advantage. All right, and plus an added benefit actually to killing the Mammets is that they give you ceruleum for your party, depending on how much damage you actually do to them. So this is really good early game, because if your team is going out and collecting some ceruleum already on the field, usually it's not enough to reach that mech threshold of 50. But by being able to actually kill some Mammets and getting some extra ceruleum there, you can power out a mech early on in the game. So for my third tip, if you happen to get that 50 ceruleum early, you can use the return action to get back to your base quickly. Instead of waiting for a teammate to die or waiting for yourself to die, anytime you leave ceruleum sitting in the bank is just wasted opportunity that you can have a mech up and putting pressure on the opponent's lanes. All right, on to the next tip here. If you don't know which lane to push or they seem about even, always push the side where the mercenary is going to spawn next. This way, if the lane is pushed out, teammates lagging behind can get a free kill on it. So make sure that when you're actually spawning into the game that you put a little bit of thought into it. It doesn't take much, which kind of goes into my next tip. Tip 4.5, we'll say. Please keep your map open. Please keep your map open. It gives you great vision of what's going on in the game itself, which lanes are pushing, if there's teammates or opponents on the train section, and it tells you also where the mercenaries are going to spawn next. So you can tell by the little icon on the map itself, and you can use that in conjunction with the timer that's on your UI. And throwing in an extra tip here, so the circle on a mercenary's head, that attack indicates you needing to get into the hitbox or at least near the mercenary itself. Otherwise, you're going to take a lot of damage if you're standing outside that zone, and you'll get hit by its attack. And then the other attack it can display is the triangles. That means just get away. Tip 5, so let's go into the mechs in general here. So the Cruise Chaser, basically use these to fight other players. Don't attack structures with it. It doesn't really do any damage against them, and so you want to lead your team in, lead your oppressors in lane with those. Next is Brute Justice. So this is both good against players and structures. Specifically, using the rocket punches will allow you to damage towers. And then the Brute Justice has a really sweet combo that allows you to pretty much instant kill players. If you land a Brute Justice punch directly onto an opponent, it'll give a stun, it'll do a little bit of damage, and then you can follow it up with a laser beam, lining it up with that stun, which will pretty much take them out instantly. And then last here, we have Oppressors. So only use these on structures. Please, only missile structures. Don't use this against people in lane or against minions. It's just not going to do a lot of damage. So the missile has actually damage-based proximity. So try to, or damage based on proximity. So try to center the missile actually on the target you're aiming for. Also, there's a way for Oppressors to do damage to the core from the middle of the map. It's kind of a little cheese strat, but it's something very useful, especially at the end of the game. So you can actually aim the missile underneath the turret platform up against the wall of, well, you'll see it in the clip here, to actually do some damage to the core itself. This is a great tactic, and the reason why I say end of game is because you can rush down the middle, which is the fastest path to their base here, and actually do some damage to try to push just enough to maybe either win the game or at least do some extra damage that will allow you to take that lead. Next, I want to talk about train spawns. So there's 4 different types of supplies you can get from the trains here. One is the ceruleum tank. This gives each party 50 ceruleum, which is enough to mech up. And just being able to even deny the opponent this specific supply is pretty game swinging. And then gob tanks deploys tanks for both lanes. So again, having that pressure on the lanes itself, excellent minion to have and pick up. Next is Gobby Juice. So this one charges up your limit break, and that's kind of all it does. I'll go a little bit more into that afterwards here. But the last one supply is Gob Crates. So this gives every supply effect prior, and gives also 3 soaring stacks, which is kind of a little damage buff for yourself here. So Gob Crates, very high priority, but only spawns later into the game. So when you do go for it, just be sure that you have enough time to take advantage of it. All right, so let's go back to Gobby Juice. So you might see in some games people in the chat saying, "Hey, it's a bad train. Don't go for this train," which is implying that Gobby Juice is up. And you can see the type of train in the middle of your screen there. Honestly, the limit break that you get just isn't that impactful for the amount of time you're investing in the train itself, which is why you see a lot of players opt to instead push the lanes out on the side, or just go and gather a couple ceruleum tanks in the center of the field here. And so yeah, it's not wrong to just kind of ignore that train in particular itself. The next tip regards buffs for this game type specifically. So for, I'd say, a lot of players, they aren't aware these buffs actually exist. So the first one is the towers. By standing underneath your tower here, kind of within that circle range, it'll grant you a pretty good defensive buff that helps mitigate some damage and actually grants a slow heal over time. And so if you're getting pushed, just make sure you keep within that tower range to give yourself that slight edge. And that also is kind of the reason why it's so hard to kill opponents underneath their tower. So really, at that point around their tower, again, make sure you try to focus on the Mammets when you can, making sure your NPCs are crashing in, and not spending so much time focusing on killing the opponents because of how hard it is. And then the next buff is regarding the train. So when the train comes into the middle platform, standing on those actual square or rectangle platforms on either side of the train and on the train itself, it grants you a damage up buff. So ideally, do your best to actually stay within that zone and not kind of fall out of it. If you are getting, heavily hit, don't be afraid to drop down, heal up, and then hop back up on that platform. But do your best to try to stay on it, especially for the tanks there. Okay, so that's kind of the tips for today. Hopefully you learned something or feel inspired to play the game mode again. And yeah, I'll be coming out with more Final Fantasy Online content in the future. So go ahead, like, and subscribe. There's no other choice that you have there because I need all the help I can get. I need more RP emotes. I'm not optimally RPing right now, so thanks.